Thank you. So good morning, Montreal. My next talk will be on survival guide for VCs. It will include not going to the Tokyo bar until 3:30 in the morning. But today we're going to talk about surviving your first 24 months as a startup. So 2 words on me. So we're a seed stage venture investor. The thing that's unique, I guess, about our approach, or specific to a small family of funds, is that almost 90% of what we do starts at seed. And I'm seeing Joe Chernoff from Kinvey, good example of a company that we seeded out of Techstars, and that went on to raise Series A and so forth. We're actually the top seed investor in New England over the last few years. And we are also proud to support entrepreneurship in Quebec, les belles entreprises québécoises. As you guys would say, I'm from Belgium actually, so I can make fun of the Québécois. So we backed Hopper locally, big data travel search company, Lagoa, Cinemagram. And I tend to focus primarily on consumer-facing stuff, so digital media, e-commerce. And as Devin aptly said, I seeded and backed every round for a company called Zoopla, which 5 years after creation is 90 million in revenues and is the #2 real estate player in the UK. I had an incredible ride with a company called Dailymotion. We almost got sued out of existence. We ran out of cash 5 times. And we ended up building the largest ever digital media site out of Europe with 200 million monthly uniques. Was also involved with Price Minister, which became the #3 e-commerce site in France, which we sold to Rakuten of Japan, fortunately in 2010 for $250. So that's enough on me. Let's talk about you guys. So in the words of Stephen Gary Blank, who's the entrepreneurship professor at Stanford, a startup is nothing more than a temporary organization in constant search of a repeatable and scalable business model. So in other words, you're sort of running an experiment on your own organization and trying to find product market fit and a repeatable model. What I want to focus on today, talking about survival, is things that you can influence. Because as I always like to say, defeat starts at home. Very often you'll find that you'll be fighting yourself as an organization, as a team, instead of fighting the market. And so I kind of want to focus on what you can influence, the factors that you can influence in building a company. Before we go into the meat, I'd like to talk for a few seconds about how we view startups. So if you can picture a kind of triangle, and that's the entrepreneurship unit, and your team, technology, and traction are sort of the 3 components that I like to think of simplistically as being the pillars on which startup companies are built. And usually when you start out, you'll be good on one of these dimensions, and your job through the seed process is to create as much surface area in that triangle as you can, so you score highly on all of these metrics. If you think also about what we care about, it's essentially investments that have real impact. And so the perception, so if you look at this graph, the x-axis is the number of companies backed, and the y-axis is the investment return. It's sort of human nature that you don't think you're going to fail. And so your perception is always that you'll be one of these companies that does somewhere between 1 and 5 times and possibly more. But the reality is actually incredibly skewed. It's incredibly skewed. We look at our portfolios, and it's always 1, 2, 3 companies that deliver $100, $200, $400 million back to the fund, and everybody else is kind of 1x and below, except for a few exceptions. And so whilst I love every single one of my projects, and I'm passionate about every entrepreneur that I back, and I fight for them, and I want to enable them to be as good as they can, the reality at the end of the day is that you're looking at this incredibly skewed profile there. So another way to think about it is that we try and manage to find both upside and have impact on the fund. So at Atlas, we like to talk about a glimmer of greatness. Glimmer of greatness is some notion that you have unlimited upside, where we don't know the path, because the path will be written by you as a team and us as an investor. It's kind of how you build to that outcome. But we like to think that somehow there is a big upside opportunity lurking somewhere inside your project. So that's the upside piece. And then we care about impact. Impact for me means, I need to return $150 million back to my fund to have impact. So I need to find a way to go and concentrate capital into those companies that are taking off and doing well. And that's sort of what you're trying to optimize for. So investors tend to refer to this as signal. And I would say that your job through the seed phase is to create as much signal as you can. And if you think back to my team technology traction, you're basically trying to score on these dimensions and sort of up the volume gradually to the point where I have no choice but to fund you, right? That's sort of what you're trying to achieve there. And then what Dave said yesterday, which I think is extremely true, is that you're trying to prove repeatability and scalability. And the most frustrating thing for you guys as entrepreneurs is going to be when you talk to investors like me, I'm going to say, well, we don't quite have enough signal yet. And you're going to go like, what the fuck does signal mean? Oh, I have to give $100 to Dave because he trademarked fuck on stage. I apologize. I'll try not to do that again. What the fuck does that mean? And you're going to go, well, you have 40,000 users, and that's great, and it's growing fast, but I have no idea how you monetize, and your retention's a bit low. And you as an entrepreneur are going to go, Jesus Christ, I don't understand. These people don't want to take risk. And the reality is because we're sort of modeling in our head what the profile of your company is and how much signal we got and how big your triangle area is. And we're looking for that signal and that repeatability and that scalability. And very often people forget that we are also we're not looking for proof that you can make money, right? But we are looking for a clear understanding of the mechanisms by which we're going to build the repeatable and scalable model that we can back. Now, this is probably, for me, one of the most important things. If you are a team of product people, you will not spend enough time talking to your customers, guaranteed. If you're a team of business guys, you will systematically underestimate the value of product, guaranteed. And so whatever the DNA and the makeup of your team, you will never do enough of the stuff you're not good at, and that is probably where the key to success lies. So if you're a team of engineers, you should spend 3.5 times more time talking to customers and going with little pieces of paper and drawing interfaces in front of them before you commit a single line of code. And if you're a business guy and you think, oh, I need a technologist. Well, no, you got to think differently. You got to think, I need an A-plus talent co-founder who's going to help me get outside my comfort zone and challenge me on what's possible to do technologically. So you need to own what's outside your comfort zone because that's where the magic happens. This is why Stephen Gary Blank always says, get out of the building, which is, building a startup is not about building product, right? It is about the search for repeatable and scalable model and meeting a market need. So the core startup killers are probably talent, time, choices, and cash. And we're going to run through some examples here and make this a little bit more real. I always say defeat starts at home because I've lived it so many times. So you can have the case of starting to work with your brother, who turns out is just the wrong person to build a company with you. I'll give you one example out of Dailymotion. So if you picture Dailymotion in the early days, it's 4 or 5 people, I think. They were in this rickety little office in Paris, 5th floor, no aircon, everybody's like sweating. And they were basically, at the beginning, there were just 2 people who wanted to share videos after a trip to New York. Now, they go and talk to angels in the Paris marketplace, which I'm sure is not dissimilar to Montreal, and everybody's telling them, you need a business person, you need a guy with gray hair, you need somebody who's experienced. And they took that advice, and they went out, met some guy who said, hey, I'm a deal maker, and I can be your CFO, and I can introduce you to some angels. And without further ado, they're like, great, our problem's solved. They were so desperate to raise cash that they basically took the first person that came, took his intros to angels, and ended up with someone who's a CFO who couldn't use Excel, all right? Like literally. He used to put the invoices in the same cell by adding plus next to each other. It was just unreal. But we had this person for 2 years, and it almost killed the company because he used to have debates about, I'm not a co-founder, that's okay, but I want to be named as a vice co-founder. And that's the kind of shit, when we have this company that went from 500,000 uniques to 3 million, to 6 million, to 45, to 80 in 9 months. And we had some idiot who was like, I really would like vice co-founder on the website. And it just beggared belief, right? And so this entropy meant that we were wasting all that wonderful energy inside the company. And it happens with bad boards, bad co-founders, bad hires. So I always say, if you're not doing 8 references on the early people that you hire, you're not doing your job right. 8 references, think about it. I want 4 that the person gave you, 4 that are unsolicited. And you keep digging until you find shit. Because everybody's got shit. If you dig enough on me, you're going to find 1 or 2 people who hate my guts. And it could be misunderstanding, it could be things I've learned that I've improved on, but you will find them. And when you find them, you will have a full picture of my personality, and you can then decide, yeah, okay, I can get over these shortcomings and think that this person's right for me. But think of it as a strategic and industrial problem. You're going to be hiring talent all the way through, and it is the core skill that you have as a person will be to develop filter and to make sure that you're incredibly rigorous about the people you bring on. It's like a marriage, right? Like it's really, really hard to separate from early people. Now, this is a classic one, and there's one person in the room I won't name who ran into this recently. Time is an enemy, and it is human nature to overestimate how fast you can get stuff done. So your wonderful engineers who are rock star coders who've never shipped software in their lives, but they're fantastic and they just come out of MIT, are suddenly magically going to hold to every timeline item that you set them. So what really happens is, so you think, great, I have a quarter to build a team, a quarter to build a product, a quarter to launch, I'll have great metrics, I'll raise 5 million Series A. And then you're 3 weeks late on launching the product, you put it out, you realize your backend isn't scalable, that your Amazon implementation doesn't quite replicate as nicely as you thought, and then you lose another 3-4 weeks. We had that case recently with the company I'm mentioning, and then we made another mistake. We got a marketing hire on board. We didn't validate him. Well, we had some negative validation, didn't go deep enough, and then we had the wrong guy for launch. He couldn't even design the website properly, his messaging was weak, and then before you know it, instead of launching in February, we launched in May. And then the founder's like, well, I'm out of cash in June. It's like, so what's the only thing you can do is come to me, and come to Real Ventures in this case, and luckily we were like, we'll bridge you, we love what you do. But it could also be the moment where your nasty investor goes, that's great, I'll take ownership of your company, right? Which some people do, it happens. So you got to always think about time as your enemy and be realistic about what can be achieved. Now, Dave talked about beating the Series A crunch. Like both him and I think it's kind of a misnomer. I think we live in a different world today. In the past, it was great. It was like raise a bit of seed, go to a brand name investor and get a 5 to 8 million Series A on the back of product and then hope for the best. The problem with the so-called Series A crunch is that the bar keeps getting higher because your competition, quote unquote, in terms of money, so other startups are doing so much with the cash they're being given. They're proving so much. And so we see a ton of projects and we're like, the bar keeps getting higher and higher. So you sort of end up in this more chaotic world where instead of clean seed, clean A, you're sort of constantly raising money. It could be a Kickstarter project. It could be that you're doing a filler on AngelList. By the way, everybody should be on AngelList. Like, do me a favor, get a great profile, make sure your investors on there, your lawyers on there. It is a great social proof that every startup should be leveraging. But anyway, you might be raising friends and family and Kickstarter and AngelList and a seed extension. And so you have to kind of live with the reality that you're going to be in this sort of semi-constant fundraising mode until you've proven enough that you can hit the big time. So if you listen to Dene yesterday from Indiegogo, she had to go through that for about 2.5 years of this sideways movement, right? And luckily, she was so in love with her mission, and as she put it, the why of why she was doing it, that she stuck with it and ended up executing. Let me go a bit further. Come back to that. Cash is more important than your mother. This is an old saying. I forgot who said this. This has been around forever. The one thing that will reliably kill you is not being able to make payroll. So no matter what you do, your number one responsibility is to not run out of cash. It sounds trite. It's back to the point about time. People overestimate how much they can do within a certain amount of time. They also reliably lose track of how quickly they're going to run out of money. Your number one enemy is called payroll. It is your responsibility to never run out of cash. And when the fear moves from here to here because you're solo with the responsibility of jobs and not losing your parents' money for which they remortgage the house and my money and the world is on your shoulders, it is hard to keep calm. But you gotta remember, cash is more important than your mother. There's a great Canadian company called, mental freeze, FreshBooks. And so FreshBooks was built by two guys who started, they said, oh, invoicing is fantastic because if we automate invoicing, we will give their lives back to single business owners. And so they said, we want for the designer and the architect and the gardener to be able to enjoy time with their kids or whatever, or music or whatever they like, instead of writing invoices. So what they did is for 2 years, two of them in a room, iterated product, talked to their users every day, and they spent zero cash. They did it out of a garage or a bedroom, and they spent no money. You have to avoid putting an anchor around your neck that's called burn, and when you raise money from the likes of me, it's really tempting to start upping your burn. I'll hire a few people, maybe I do need that developer now instead of in 6 months. It's your responsibility to make sure you never run out of cash. So try and close quickly on the two main things. So the hardest thing as an entrepreneur is that you constantly have to make decisions in conditions of extreme uncertainty, right? You have no data, the market is moving in chaotic fashion, and your number one job is to make decisions. Your number two job is to define the mission. Your number three job is to focus only on the mission. If you're building a company, and if you're not fundraising, you probably shouldn't be here today. You should be in the back room building the company that you're trying to build. Focus only on the mission. My best entrepreneur is called Alex Chesterman. He never spent a minute at an entrepreneurship conference because, the only thing he cares about is building Zoopla. And when I ask him as a favor to take a meeting with company X or Y, he says no. And I respect him for that, by the way. The only thing he cares about is the mission. And then you have to move the ball down the field every day. So people get stuck for all sorts of reasons. They say, I can't really build a company until I've got money. Well, that's a catch-22, and I feel for people who are in that situation because it is hard, but you got to move the ball down the field every day and build a company because ultimately you're going to get it to a point where it's fundable. So don't get caught in that spiral that says, I can't build it because I have no money. Because the reality is that situation may last for quite a long time. And so move the ball down the field every day. Don't waste time with admin and Twitter and writing blog posts that don't matter. Move the ball down the field every day. Oh, yeah, correct. And then maybe the most important thing is focus. So focus, by that I mean also deciding what not to do and doing one thing extremely well. So at Dailymotion in the early days, we had 3 million users and 5 million users and 12 and 18, and we had to make a decision that said, do we start to monetize early so we can demonstrate to investors that we know how to make money, or do we just focus on scaling this platform and these users as fast as we can? And we took a radical decision that said, we're not going to do any monetization. We're going to focus on getting to 80 or 100 million users because that was the way in which we were going to build that company and be successful. And focus is the core reason why people are successful. So if I have time, I have a minute 20, I'll tell you a little story to finish, which is totally different. So when the West was being built, people would fight the Comanches. And the Comanches could shoot about 20 arrows at 40 feet on horseback at speed. And instead, on the other side, you had Kentucky rifles, which you could load about 3 times a minute. So the American West, the advance of the pioneers was blocked continuously by this technology problem. And along came a guy called Colt. And so Colt basically designed the first pistol, six-shot pistol, which he tried to sell to the army unsuccessfully. He effectively went bankrupt after securing a first contract because the guns wouldn't hold in the field. 6 years later, one of the Texas Rangers who'd used the gun came back to him and said, I need a fast repeat pistol, but I need a big one that can go through the buffalo shields that the Indians carry. And he designed the Colt pistol, which is essentially the Walker Colt, which is essentially a huge six-shooter. And that is what turned the American West, and that is what enabled the West to be won, quote unquote, and the Indians to be massacred. So the point on that is, the man, Mr. Colt, became one of the richest men in America because he kept focus and he did one thing well. It's like the iPhone, it's like SMS, right? One product well, sold repeatably, scalably. That is the key, is simplicity, repeatability, scalability, and focus. And the point about the Colt story, which I like, is there is nothing inherently good about technology, right? There is nothing inherently moral about technology. So the one thing I want to leave you on is when you apply tech and how you build your companies, apply morality and ethics to it, because we're all writing the future of humanity, we're creating companies. Let's do it in a way that avoids Indians getting massacred. So on that note, on that odd note, thank you very much, and have a great day.